Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Cash. I'm the COO of the ISA. I want to thank you for coming tonight and joining us for ISA Presents Get Spooked, a look inside horror stories and ghost stories and horror movies. We have tonight two of our ISA team members, Scott, Markus, and Timm, resident experts at ghost stories, along with our special guest, DJ MacHale, which we are so thrilled to have you join us. Thank you, DJ. We're looking forward to this conversation. Just a couple of quick announcements. I want to say thanks to our sponsors tonight. We have two great sponsors, both giving out some prizes. Our partners at the CineQuest Film and Creativity Festival empower writers and artists across the globe through inspiration, opportunity, recognition, and growth. They're in their 17th year of the festival. They present screenwriters with virtually countless networking opportunities, increased industry visibility, and the chance to win extraordinary acclaim and prizes. The competition welcomes screenplays and teleplays of all genres and lengths and provides unique opportunities for writers to be discovered, have their work produced, win cash prizes, and further inspire their creative fervor. They are giving everybody tonight $10 off a screenwriting entry. And then our other sponsor, our partners at the #1 TV and film writing school, Script Anatomy, have helped thousands of writers develop and hone their craft. Alums have nabbed hundreds of writing fellowships and staffing spots, shows like Selena, Dave, Lovecraft County, The Handmaid's Tale, Dead to Me. I could keep going. Don't miss Script Anatomy's Screenwriting Craft Festival. It's coming up November 5th through 7th. It's a 3-day weekend of 6 workshops. They focus on career, world building, structure, theme, scene work, and dialogue. It's all on Zoom. A festival pass gets you 6 workshops for the price of 4. Plus, it comes with access to an evening cocktail hour, a showrunner panel, pre-recorded in the biz talks with special guests. So don't miss this great opportunity to up your writing game. They are giving one spot, one pass to the festival to one lucky attendee tonight. The way to win that is by tweeting out your favorite tidbit from tonight, either something you learn or a fun ghost story or anything from tonight, and tag at Network ISA. And then we're going to draw a winner in the next couple of days, and we'll contact you if you won that pass. Okay, and just a couple more.
I will say, just to add to that, Molly, Script Anatomy was founded by my original mentor, really, Tanya Bhattacharya from Writers Bootcamp days forever ago. If you're looking to write TV and be educated on how to do that, they're quite literally the best in town. So everybody should be taking that seriously as far as getting that pass to that event. They're awesome. They're better than I am at teaching TV, which is probably a terrible business approach since I'm a consultant, but they are better at it than I am. So definitely pay attention.
And he's really good. So
and
that's a compliment.
CineQuest is for real too. For everybody looking for real contests, CineQuest is awesome.
Yes, we love both of these companies, organizations, people. We've been working with CineQuest for many years, and Tanya has done a few of these events with us, and she's fantastic. Thank you, Max, for telling us all that.
For our attendees and people watching on replay, we are basically you're seeing the behind the scenes a little bit of a show that Max and I do called the Fantastic Story Society, where we talk to all sorts of storytellers. I mean, we just had an amazing conversation 2 days ago. This one isn't out yet, but with the guy that is the star of the Netflix series Dark Tourist, a documentary series about going on vacation to places like, fallout shelters and whatnot, just the weirdest, most dangerous, unusual places in the world. That was riveting. And we also talked to the next episode that'll come out. We talked to a guy that is one of the more prolific board game designers today. And awesome. That was really fun and mind-blowing as well. Just, there's a million ways to tell a story, and sometimes that story needs dice to be completed. But so what we usually do, we kind of have some fun, and we ham it up at the beginning where if you listen to the show, there's some fun sound effects and a gavel banging as we are calling into session the latest meeting of our secret society. Mm-hmm. As we induct a new member. Now, this is a very, very special episode because we have a returning member.
I'm already a member.
DJ was a single digit
originals
on your membership card, I believe.
Yeah.
You were very early on. And so we were going to, Max doesn't even know about this, but if you're a member that is so prolific and so has so much to say that they need to be honored again, well, that inducts you into the Fantastic Story Society Hall of Fame. So welcome, first member of the Fantastic Story Society Hall of Fame, DJ MacHale.
Welcome, DJ.
What an honor. I've never been in any Hall of Fame before.
Yeah, you have to have an induction speech. We didn't even give you a chance.
Well, that is an oversight because the DJ is he's created so many great shows. And I think one of my first tips to share with anybody is if you do work on a show or a movie, you have that good opportunity, make sure you IMDb everybody on the call sheet. Because I worked with DJ for almost a whole season of a TV show, not realizing that, oh yeah, he's the guy that created Are You Afraid of the Dark? One of my very favorite shows growing up, and definitely something that was an inspirational thing for me growing up, that I want to be able to make shows like this one day, or to be a storyteller, to even just to get a seat at that campfire and find out what's in that sparkly dust,
Oh, and in 4 days is the 30th anniversary of the first showing of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Get out of town.
It was Halloween night, 1991 on Nickelodeon. I did a panel with a lot of the actors, a lot of the behind the scenes people, the writers and musicians and whatnot. So it was a really fun panel that it's going to air. It's going to air. You don't air. It's going to cast.
Yeah.
On the anniversary date. So yeah,
how great is that? And I just watched the remake, which I thought was really well done and fun. And obviously we can talk all about, the inner workings of all of that, but keep going, Scott. What else can we say that will convince everyone that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame?
Well, first off, we run it, so we don't have to convince.
Yeah, right.
I'm an in.
Yeah.
But I found it funny, or not funny, but awesome, I guess. The other day I was at Target and there was a big, must watch horror movies, and it had like Nightmare Before Christmas on it, and Coco, and all these great Halloween ones. And your Steve Guttenberg film was also on that list, The Tower of Terror.
Tower of Terror, yeah, that was that's right. That was a Halloween movie. It took place on Halloween, and it was based on I was the first guy to make a movie based on a Disney theme park ride.
Yeah.
Now they're making pirate movies,
right,
cruises, it's all sorts of,
the Muppets Haunted Mansion.
Oh yeah,
Haunted Mansion. Apparently they're going to make another Tower of Terror with Scarlett Johansson.
Okay.
So I have a small window to say I'm the only one who made a Tower of Terror movie.
Yeah. Tonight's the night.
Tonight's the night, exactly.
It's amazing because it speaks to the staying power of these things that you've worked on. That isn't even to touch on the Pendragon series. I mean, DJ is a very prolific author as well, novelist. DJ, you write stuff that can, stand the test of time, because people still are watching and find these things beloved, these titles.
Well, I think with Are You Afraid of the Dark in particular, timing is everything, because it's been the past couple of years. The 90s is become very much in vogue. And I think it's because kids or people who are kids in the 90s, they're starting to feel their own mortality right now. So suddenly they're starting to get nostalgic about things. I mean, at a certain age, people who are 12 aren't nostalgic about anything usually, but when you get to 30 years old, suddenly start getting nostalgic. And those were people who were coming of age, kind of, kids in the 90s. So it's not just Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's so many 90s. I mean, that 70s show is coming back as that 90s show. I think the Goldbergs have moved from the 80s up into the 90s.
Yeah.
So the 90s are a big thing, and Are You Afraid of the Dark was a big thing in the 90s. So
a lot of the executives who are in charge now of saying yes to shows were born in 1987, 88, 89, and they grew up in the 90s, and so they're the gatekeepers of what can go through, and I'm excited to see it. I love the 90s. This is one of my favorite decades. Come on. I've had arguments with my friends and family, like, what's the best year of your life or the best age of your life? And by far, it's 9 years old. It's got to be.
I heard that from a lot of people who say that is the age.
You're in between, like you're not too young to not really know what's going on, and you have no responsibility yet. So you're in a complete freedom year of being able to do whatever you want. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent.
Well, it's funny you say that a lot of the stories that I write, whether it's TV or books, are about kids that age. Yeah, a little bit older. I'd say 13 or 14.
Right.
Because, and the reason I like that age is because, kind of for the same reason you just said, is that that's the age where you think you know everything, but you really don't know anything.
Yeah.
You're old enough to not be tethered to your parents, so you can actually exist in circles other than your parents looking at you all the time, so
right.
you can get into trouble, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But it's also a time where you're starting to learn about life too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that really great. It's, you know what it is? It's the wonder years. That's what it is. Speaking of the show that came back.
You're deciding whether or not
I write about kids that age.
And I love that. So, because I was going to ask, like, do you have an affinity for a particular type of story? Because a lot of the projects you've worked on have had some, relative reference to a fantasy element or a supernatural element or something else going on that is a little bit bigger and supernatural. So, do you just kind of gravitate toward that, or is this a choice?
It's also what comes out too. You never
right.
You can't necessarily choose what you're on. I would love to write a sitcom. I'm not funny. I can't write that. But I think there's a common thread that goes through everything that I write, no matter what the age is that it's about. I try to write about characters, and I think most everyone can say this to some extent or another. I try to write stories about characters who are going through an interesting conflict that is very real and very relatable, that we would be interested in watching them or reading about them or whatever it happens to be, just on that level. Mm-hmm. Whether you can relate to it or it's compelling or it's interesting or whatever. Then once you layer in the supernatural element, the boogeyman, the paradoxical moment or whatnot, you're with those people and you care about those people. You may hate those people, whatever it is, you care about those people.
Yeah.
Then when the supernatural element comes in, that just compounds the whole thing. And ideally their personal conflict, whatever that is, will kind of resolve simultaneously with the supernatural conflict. And that's what, and I think that's going back to what you're saying, Scott, about Are You Afraid of the Dark having longevity. I think that's one of the things that gives that show longevity, is that it's not just Boogeyman of the Week, with somebody running around being chased by a boogeyman. It has those elements I just talked about. So that resonates a little bit more. And so it gives it a little more heart, makes it a little more thought provoking, as well as adding about the kids.
Yeah, you care about the kids. I mean, and one more thing, Scott, but I'm just curious, like, now you can define that, DJ, as an author, as a writer, like, this is what I intend to do with, a conceptual approach to the story, et cetera, characters. Was there a time, do you remember, kind of going, oh, that's what I'm doing? Because in every writer's life, you don't really know that's what you're doing. It's hard to define that approach. Or did you learn that at a certain age, where like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do? I'm supposed to take a character that we care about, put him in this other situation.
I think it's a process. I don't think that came naturally. I wasn't, it wasn't born with, I know exactly how to write this. Because a lot of times, and not everyone gets that either. Let me go back to Are You Afraid of the Dark again. Often I didn't write all those episodes. Obviously, I was the showrunner, so I worked with all the writers on it, and we had a lot of them. And in fact, I didn't have a writer's room. I didn't have staff. I bought stories. That's what is an anthology. So I had the luxury of doing that. So with each new season, once the writing process started, I put the word out to say, I'm looking for new stories. So that way I could get it wasn't just 4 people sitting around a room going, oh God, I got to come up with something. Yeah. It was it was hundreds of people saying, oh, I got to come up with something. And then I get the best of those. They'd come to me with a story. I'd say, well, what's your story idea? And they'd say, I've got a story about haunted hand sanitizer. And I'd say, okay, who are the kids? They're like, I don't know, a couple kids. Anyway, this haunted sand, whenever you put it on your hands, it actually gives you the power to turn things into gold or whatever. And I'd say, oh, that's neat. Who are the kids? Like, who cares? Like, no, you're missing the whole point. I want to have a couple interesting characters. It's like any good story. It begins and ends with character. You want to care about the characters. And I, when I first started writing, I'm as guilty of that as anyone, as I go right to the MacGuffin. I think instantly, what's the spooky hook here that's going to make it scary? And then inevitably I'd write something and it just would fall flat because you're not engaged, because you just tell the same joke and over and over. It's not funny anymore. Yeah. You've got to be engaged with the character and what their journey is, like any good story. I could even argue to say that, not argue, but make the case that all good spooky stories are mysteries. And that's maybe why I'm drawn to writing those things, because I like mysteries and I like trying to solve them. I like clues. I like trying to figure out, like trying to get ahead. What are they doing? And you try to think about it, not only the level of what you're seeing, but also trying to think, somebody wrote this. Yeah. And somebody knows that people have seen this a million times. So they wouldn't go there because that's too obvious. So I love that stuff, both as a viewer, reader, or as a writer. So there's nothing more fun and frankly easier than to say, okay, not only am I going to write a mystery, but that mystery is going to have a whole nother layer of supernatural cool stuff on top of it. So it's just more fodder to make it an interesting, fun thing.
Well, he's already answered a couple of our script chat questions.
Yeah. No, it's great. No,
good night, everyone.
I was going to actually point that out because one of the questions that we got asked last week on a Script Pipeline, Max and I participated in their weekly script chat Twitter thing, a Twitter event that they do. And one of the questions, and there were some really great questions that I wanted to bring back up to speak with DJ about, but one of them you just really finished, which is great. Because you answered it exactly the way I thought you would. What about characters in horror? Do you feel like it's similar to an action movie, that characters' evolution is less important than those in drama? And
no. I mean, if you want to write something good, it's important. I mean, certainly there are plenty of stories that are just purely serial killers coming after you with a hatchet. Go.
Yeah.
and it's, but to me, those don't interest me as a viewer, or because I need something more than that. It's something's more engaging than that.
I just rewatched the original Halloween the other night because I want to watch the new one that just came out, and I was like, so what's Michael Myers' motivation here exactly? Like, why is he just killing people because he doesn't like teenagers having sex? Because that's the only thing I can come up with. And it was this overlying thought in my head through the whole time. And I'm like, this just isn't scary. It's just,
well, and it's, you hate, whenever I talk about what we're talking about now to people, they're like, oh, you're thinking too hard about it. Stop analyzing it so much. Because what ultimately I will do is I'll watch a movie or read a book and I'm reading it. I'm not analyzing, I'm reading it or watching it. I'm just enjoying it. And getting whatever response I get out of it. This is the way everybody is. But afterwards, I try to think back and say, okay, why was it that I was feeling the way I was feeling or wasn't feeling the way I was feeling? And oftentimes I'll see a movie and be kind of a little ambivalent about it. But then the more I think about it, I'm like, or talk to other people about it, I'm like, oh, I missed that. Oh, that was pretty. Yeah, that was. Oh, no, that was really well done. I didn't get that. Maybe I sneezed. I know, whatever it was. And so then I'll go back and watch the movie and say, oh, this was much better than I thought it was. Other times I'll feel kind of ambivalent and I'll go back and think about it and I'll like the movie even less and less as I realize how badly written it was. And that just happened to me recently. And I'm not going to mention the movie, but based on that video I did the other day,
Gotcha.
Glad I made that video before I saw the movie.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, you speak about something that I think as writers we all have to face a lot too, which is that, the stories have all been told before. Whatever we're doing, we are having to deal with hundreds of, if not thousands of years of history of storytelling. And especially the example I gave the other week was just that, your typical haunted house ghost story movie is something spooky about this house. There are some good scares, and now we want to decide or try to discover and solve that mystery about why is this house haunted? What does the ghost want? And now we go and we solve the murder, and now the ghost can be free. That's a story we've seen a million times, and that's still one of my favorite movies is Stir of Echoes, and that's the same blueprint right there. And I still love that movie. So have you ever been in the process of writing something and thought this territory is too well worn, I got to bring something else to it, or I have to pivot, or how do you address those types of situations?
Well, I do it by doing something that a lot of, let me talk about books for a second. That I think authors are probably split 50-50 down the middle on. Some people think this is a good idea. Other writers think it's a horrible idea. And that is, and I hate to use this word because it's a little bit too precise for what I'm talking about, but it's outlining. I outline before I do a story, and I hate to use the word outline because it sounds like it's A, B, A, B. It's not that formal. All it is thinking through an entire story, or in broad strokes, entire story before I write Once Upon a Time. And I think that is really critical with supernatural stories and stories that are, other than real, because when you write something like that, you're making up a new set of rules for whatever the supernatural concept is. And you can make up whatever rules you want, but the number one rule is once you make them up, you got to stick to them. You can't start monkeying around with those rules. So what I need to do is think through my entire story. I almost write backwards to say, this is the denouement, this is how it's going to end, and then work backwards just to make sure that all of those things are lined up. And in that process, to specifically answer your question, if I feel like it's ground that's when I realize it's ground that's been gone over before too much. And that's when I get rid of it. Because it's this is sounding like everything else.
I tell my writers that all the time. You have to stay at a bird's eye view for as long as you can. To be able to see everything, and it allows you to work in a non-linear way too, where you're not just trying to plow through from page one to the end. You look at the end first, maybe, and then you can bounce to the midpoint. Well, if I know that's going to happen at the end, maybe this could happen at the middle, and then you start filling in the gaps. And it also allows you to kind of track the progression of your characters and those relationships within the big idea that you have. It makes such a difference. It saves you time, technically, even though it feels like it doesn't.
Well, especially if it's a mystery. And most supernatural spooky stories are mysteries. You have to know why the ghost is doing what they're doing, because then it has to make sense, but also that allows you to then go back and throw in the red herrings and throw in the misdirections and throw in the clues and throw in the incidents that will ultimately lead to that thing. And you can't do that. I mean, speaking for the other 50% of writers, there's some that just say, it was a dark and stormy night, and then go. That could lead to a lot of dead ends.
And, totally, I don't like writing yourself into a corner and all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. That kind of segues into a little bit of a question that popped into my head before it came on, and we've chatted a few times. I interviewed you during one of my book releases, and so we've had a bunch of back and forths. And I don't think I've asked this question, mainly because at first in my head I'm like, it's way too broad, and DJ's going to be like, I have no idea how to answer that question. But I kind of want to make it a little bit more specific, because the only paintbrush, so-called, that writers have are just letters and words. Like, that's all we have. And so taking that and then making a story scary, it's just through trying to lead a reader, and even for screenwriters, the first level of defense is a reader, through a scary experience. And so we'll try to focus. I guess it doesn't matter, screenplay plays or books, but word choice is important. But what decisions are you making in terms of how to make words turn into a scary story? I don't know how else to ask that. It's such a broad question.
Yeah, I think, well, practice. That's one part. But I think it goes back to the kind of a general conceit, and that is what is truly scary is not what you see, it's what you think you might see.
Mm.
So by it's almost a holding back. When I'm writing action scenes, sometimes I realize and things have to breathe and things have to have time to grow and for tension to build. That's like, it's hard to see on a page to say, how is the tension going to build? And you have to, as a screenwriter, even though you're thinking of ultimately how it's going to show on the screen, the first line, like you said, the first line is someone's going to be reading this.
Right.
So it has to work on the page as well. So I've often gone back, like with action scenes, and slowed things down, put in beats, put in not so much misdirections, but just hold back so that the reader of your script is going, where's this going? Where's this going? Where's this going? I don't know. Where's it going to go? So you have time for the tension to build up in your head before the payoff comes.
Right. Right.
So I think that's a really big part of it. And that is, I guess you could say less is more. It's not so much less is more. It's teasing. It's teasing what might happen. Some of the people, especially with my kids shows, people say, what's the appropriate age for someone to watch these things? And I was like, yeah, age has nothing to do with it. It's imagination. If you are an absolutely pragmatic, practical person, I don't care how scary something is on the page or on the screen, you're gonna be like, give me a break. That's not,
yeah.
Come on, that's not scary. But if you have an imagination, you're gonna get hooked. So there are times when I watch a scary movie where, and I don't know if it's the writer in me or the director in me or just my imagination, because it automatically goes there, that some of the scariest moments for me are things where I'm just watching someone doing something. I'm like, oh my God, if somebody looks over his shoulder, I'm going to freak out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Right.
But it's always the possibility that it might happen. And
yeah.
That's where you can really build intention.
That's what those original horror directors like the John Carpenters of the world really, they changed that feeling, because there is that one scene where the actress's name in Halloween,
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis. Holy cow. Jamie Lee Curtis was really scared, but she's on one portion of the screen, like over here. And then there's just a dark hallway over here. And so she's leaning up against the wall and there's a pitch black hallway. And for a while they hold there and you don't see anything in the darkness. And slowly Michael's face comes in. So like you have this feeling throughout the whole thing, like they're framing this in a way to make us kind of look over that way because something might be there. And so you're totally right. It's the anticipation of something possibly being scary and then not. That's why I loved Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House, the new one that came out like a couple of years ago, because he purposely put in ghosts and things in the background that had nothing to do with the story, that if we were looking over there, we might see something. I just thought that was genius.
And meanwhile, we see, like, I'm so full of dread. Are your cats going to now fall off the ledge again?
I know. I've come
established
to this
it in the first act. That has happened once. And
I've somehow come to this like realization that if you fall, dude, it's on you. I can't do this anymore because I installed all those little, it looks terrible, but like the guardrails and stuff everywhere. I live in a loft, and so I can't imagine what it would be like if anyway. But yeah,
but that's perfect. That's tension. It's like you look at the cat like, God, don't
right.
It's like, is he gonna get done with his sentence in time for me to say, look out behind you? It was we were living it.
Right.
I'm so glad you mentioned Mike Flanagan, because I was thinking about him before on two levels. One is doing things that haven't been done before and how do you do it again? But also what you just described. I'm watching Midnight Mass now.
Yeah. So am I.
And I have one episode to go. So
I'm only 4 in, so okay.
First, on the level of what you were just talking about, and I think it's his style. There was a shot, and last night, whatever episode it was I was watching, where the cameras, see if I can do it. The camera's following a guy who's pacing back and forth. I don't know if he's watching it, and he walks over there, and he walks over here, and he walks over there. And I've seen Haunting of Hill House, and I've seen Bly Manor, and now I've seen 7 episodes of Thing. And I'm like, oh shit. I know the third time it comes back, there's gonna be somebody in the background. And there was. So in that case, it was almost, I was ready for it, but I was okay with it because I knew the guy's style and I was prepared for it. But still, the image shocked me. It was so good.
He's so good because there was another moment in an episode I watched last night, which I think is like the 3rd episode, and he's having this kind of serious, not scary at all conversation with this kid about how they're both Muslim and his kid's thinking of wanting to go to church. And it's this kind of really interesting back and forth, and how the dad is kind of frustrated by it and kind of emotional. They're talking about their, deceased mom. And then he gets up and he, the kid's laying down in bed, no music, or it doesn't feel tense at all. And then the dad turns the light off next to the kid's head. And it's just this quick look to the window. And there's this really scary, like, demon face. And then the guy jumps back and says, "Oh, fuck." And I said it at the same time because it was so unexpected. And that isn't new. This has been done before, but the way he set you up as the audience, like, he's like, oh man, we're going to just wring the emotional towel here for a second. And then, oh, don't forget, this is supposed to be scary.
Well, it also, it sets, and this speaks to writing too. And I don't know, I assume that moment was written in the script, but throwing in things like that every once in a while, like warning shots. So whether or not they do the job to scare you, that did. Though I blinked at that moment, I didn't see the thing in the window. Oh, I saw his reaction. I'm like, what did I miss? What? Yeah, right. Because it was really fast. My wife's like, I don't know, I didn't see it either. No, put that aside. But when you do something like that, it's a warning shot to say, you never know when I'm going to do it again.
Right.
Yeah. And so therefore, you're like this all the time. Nothing may have. The best example of that was Blair Witch Project.
That's what's Blair. Yeah. But that was what was so great about the first 3 episodes of Midnight Mass. There's not that much that's supernatural that's presented. Very, very little. But then there's just little things in there. And I had a little moment near the end of, I think, the 3rd episode where I thought, oh, this is going to get really, really bad. Like this, there's a supernatural thing coming up here and he hasn't touched on it. And meanwhile, everybody else is having their own personal drama. And I'm like, yeah, this is not going to go well.
Well, and I think what made me think of Midnight Mass when we were talking before was talking about, you asked Scott about, everything's been done. This is a really unique story, I think. The Midnight Mass story is really unique. And for the reason you just said, Scott, it's like, I'm not going to give any spoiler. I'll try to say what I'm trying to say without giving any spoilers, but kind of like what you're describing, Scott, it's about these people who live on this island, and it's this character stories about all these interesting people. And in some ways, when not that much scary happens in the first couple of episodes, there are a couple of things that throw in that just seem like, this is just to remind you that it's going to get scary at some point. Yeah. But then when stuff does start to happen, it's almost, for me, it was almost like, this is like 2 different stories. Mm-hmm. Because this is so gritty, real to life. And this is so, whoa, what the heck is that?
Right.
I'm happy to say that I stayed with it, and it's all kind of coming together and being revealed what it is. So now it's kind of like what I said before. When I think about it afterwards, I look back and say, wow, that was really pretty brilliant. Mm-hmm. I don't know how it comes out now. They may all fall apart in the last episode.
Yeah. Squid Game did the same thing in the first half hour of the pilot. 0 reference to concept or plot. It's just a character story where we just feel like, oh my God, this guy is so flawed. And then suddenly the latter half of the pilot is just all plot. So, because then we ended up caring about that person so much more once he's in a basic kid game, But anyway, sorry, Scott. I keep going.
I want to ask, because you were some of those jumps. I think it sounds like, and especially as you're talking about Midnight Mass, starting out not super spooky, except maybe pepper it in a little bit. I want to talk about tone a little bit. Do you try to ratchet up? And this could just be a personal preference type of thing, but I don't know if there's a formula for what makes something most effective. But I always like the idea that, hey, keep something light and airy and let your audience relax at first, and then you go in, and then the tonal shift happens, and then everybody puckers up a little bit? Or do you try to set the tone early so that you get those scenes like Max is talking about in Halloween, where we're now on edge for the entire movie? What could be around the corner? What do you think, for you at least, what do you like the best?
Well, I mean, there are a couple, I think those are choices. And I've seen, and I think Midnight Mass really fits into this category, where the tone is so often set by the cinematography, and the music is, there's that kind of oppressive music it's playing that gives you that feeling of, ooh, this is that kind of stuff, and where you could be playing in the background going, we're on an island, isn't this fun? Show the exact same thing, and it's a whole different tone. So it's really just about what you want to convey. Because most of the stuff that I do are aimed at kids, it's got to be a little bit more up. It's got to be more the second thing that you said. It's got to be a little bit more in your face. Yeah. One, because they're often short stories. They're half an hour. So you don't have the ability to go for 10 minutes of character study. You gotta go, whoop, you gotta go right to it. And frankly, that applies to books too. People's attention span is so short nowadays that if you don't catch them in the first couple of pages with what it's going to be, you may lose them. So you can't hope that they're going to. If Midnight Mass had been written as a book, a lot of people probably would have, unless there was enough peppered up front to say, stay with it, this is where we're going, give us a chance to come back and give the character stuff, people would probably toss it. And that, I think, frankly, that applies to a lot of the serialized shows on the streamers right now, where it really takes, you got to be watching like 2 or 3 episodes in before you get hooked.
Totally.
It's tough getting through that first episode usually.
I mean, I will say Flanagan started, and I'm not even going to spoil anything because it's quite literally the first scene. So anybody who wants to watch, it's literally the first scene. And we see a really grisly car accident, and they are not holding back. And you can totally understand the situation. Like, the character was obviously drunk. He survived with barely a scratch. And then there's a girl on the ground that is not in good shape and dead, so so that he at least set that up as far as a deeper emotional kind of feeling. This is awful, but also with the grisly, way she was presented there. So there was at least still, it wasn't supernatural, which is interesting. Blind Manor kind of did the same thing. That was really just this long love story. Yeah. And then suddenly you have really scary things happen in like season or episode 8 and 9. But anyway, yeah.
Well, I mean, in that first scene in Midnight Mass is really kind of brilliant because it does 2 things. As you said, it sets up the character story of this one character. And there are a lot of characters, but he's kind of the main character, and it sets up his story right off the bat, right in the first couple of frames. Like, ooh, this guy is going through something. But it also shows the more grisly side of where the show could go. I remember a movie. Boy, it was I think it was in the 80s. It was the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. What was the one that was like the weird time travel thing in Mars?
Total Recall.
Total Recall.
Yeah. Something really nasty happened in the beginning of that, where like a head exploded inside a space helmet. Yeah. And it was just like, whoa, yikes. Yeah. That's where we're going. Nothing ever rose to that level of gruesomeness in the rest of the movie.
Interesting.
But it said, it's where we're going here.
Yeah. I think it was even like part of a dream sequence or something. So it was really completely unearned. They just shoehorned it in there to have that moment.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, so we have until about, I guess it would be 6:30 LA time. So for everyone who has questions of any kind, feel free to put them in the Q&A portion of the screen, or just put it in a comment box. But maybe we should get into our fantastic stories, because it might take a little bit of time.
Sure. And we don't have to go for the full 6:30, just so you're aware. If you have to head out, DJ.
Oh, right. Yeah. Whatever your deadline is.
I wanted to. Okay, cool. I just want to ask, not put you on the spot. What's going on currently in the land of DJ and writing?
Well, right. A couple things. I'm on pins and needles with a lot of things. I just went out with a book-wise. I just went out with a book of short stories that I wrote for adults, actually, believe it or not. I grew up loving and reading supernatural short stories, and I think that's where I developed my love. And frankly, maybe that's kind of the the basis for what you asked before, Max, about how do you know that it has to be character or whatever, but I just steep myself in those stories. And so because I've been working developing TV series in the past couple of years, I haven't been focused on books, but I did figure I'd have time to say, maybe I'll do some, and I had a couple of short stories published. So I thought, I'm going to write a couple of short stories because they're, you can take a couple of weeks and get them done. So I have like 6 short stories, put together a compilation called Beyond Midnight, actually, because it's kind of aimed at the people who've grown up with Are You Afraid of the Dark, and they're adults now. So it's a story that will appeal to them. So these are Beyond Midnight. So I'm waiting to hear it back on that. And I have a couple of TV shows that I've been developing. One just got passed on, but I'm going to take it out to the town, but that's pretty good. And then I got a possibility on an animated show, animated science fiction thing that looks like might be picked up by a company I will not mention. But that's where most of my time's been going. And I've been away from TV for a long time because I was focusing on writing books. And roughly 10, 12 years I've been writing books. And that's like 47 lifetimes in TV world. So it's like I'm working to reestablish and get myself known to these people. They're like, oh, I remember you from You're Still Alive, kind of thing. So that's what's been taking up my time. It's exciting. So
yeah,
and the pandemic hit at the perfect time, actually, because it gave me time to sit and focus and write all this stuff.
Isn't that the irony for writers? It really is. We were like, great, we don't have to go out.
And I'm the cat's okay. Okay, fine.
God, total play mode.
Yeah, I saw Molly was talking about pitching, and there was a seminar about pitching and whatnot. Well, it's done by Zoom now.
Yeah.
And I really like it. A lot of people hate it, but I really like it because
I do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, for any writer, an hour-long meeting takes 4 hours.
Yeah.
Because you have to brush your teeth. You got to put on pants. You got to get in the car. You got to drive through LA traffic. You got to go to the car. You have
to memorize the whole thing.
You got to remember. Well, you have to do that anyway. That you got to do. That's you can't get.
But at least you can look off camera a little bit and reference notes while you're on Zoom, and they don't know you're doing that.
But it's also convenient because if you have a deck or something like that, you just share your screen and you've got the thing. And so, and executives are notorious for canceling meetings at the last second. Or I shouldn't say that. They still cancel meetings at the last second.
Yeah.
But they're notorious for being really late to meetings. So you're sitting cooling your heels in some waiting room someplace, and then suddenly your time to pitch has gone down. Now with Zoom, it's kind of like much more regimented. They're like, this call's over, this call's coming in. They're on the phone now. You got to go.
Okay. So, right. Yeah. Yeah.
I just assume always do this. This is nice. I know people hate it, but I like it.
Mm-hmm. No, I know, we run a contest, a fellowship, I should say, called Fast Track, where our 2 fellows for each one get to have a whole bunch of meetings. And the feedback I've heard is that those meetings have gone on longer than they would have in the past. It's been more casual, and it felt like more of a conversation. For whatever reason, it felt like the executives were just more relaxed and able to connect and chill longer, as opposed to doing it in the office space. For whatever reason, that's the feedback I've gotten.
One of those reasons is that, and it's not that the executive necessarily wants this, I'm sure some do, but just going into their office puts them in a power position of, okay, you have to go sit on that couch where it's so low that you're sitting down like this,
right?
And they're sitting behind their big desk but as we're looking at this is the great equalizer. Everyone's on the same plane. So no one has any.
I'm just gonna adjust my camera to look down on.
Right, so you're looking down on. So I think that's a big part of it, that you're not on their turf. You're just on neutral ground, so to speak.
Totally.
So I want to ask, especially since I cannot wait to read your next book. What is scary to you? What frightens you? It's such an open question, but I mean, it could be anything from, well, first I'll shoehorn this in. Max, that photo I sent you earlier today, do you know where I was?
Oh, I didn't know where that was.
I'm gonna see if I can pull it up and show the camera, because this is a thing that is spooky to me. It's not paranormal at all. My phone, of course, is going excruciatingly slow. Here we go. So this is on the side of a building. And there's, if it doesn't come across, it's an owl and it says, "Weaving spiders come not here." Yes, there we go. This
That scares you?
The building I was in front of, which had very obvious security around it, was the headquarters of the Bohemian Club.
Oh.
So if you've ever heard of Bohemian Grove up in Northern California,
Yeah, sure.
there's the big owl statue that they have a cremation of hair ceremony. There's all sorts of mostly urban legends and myths about what really goes on there. I mean, some of them go as far as saying human sacrifice, obviously not, but a number of US presidents have been part of this society. And it is kind of like one of these big, all powerful things that, what really does go on back there. It's probably just a lot of rich guys, because it is a men's only club, rich guys hanging out and letting loose. But it also, how much power is going on behind that place. And if you find yourselves in the crosshairs, it's over, quite frankly.
Right. So wait, so this was a building that you went to today?
Yeah, it's in San Francisco. And I know, because of T, one of our former guests, he wrote a book called American Madness about, people that get too far into conspiracy theories. One of the people that he profiled would go to that building and picket and try to protest outside there. But it was just unusual because there was the building is very nondescript, other than that really weird and cryptic plaque, what "Weaving spiders need not enter," or whatever it says. Right. Like, what the hell does that mean? It's kind of a warning. We don't want anybody interfering with us, basically. But there's one door, and I kind of started to approach the door, and immediately a security guard came out. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna keep walking down the sidewalk.
So it's interesting though, because DJ immediately went, "That scared you?" Because you asked him what scares him. So were you kind of freaked by that? I mean, you were obviously a little weirded out.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I wasn't gonna mess around. We were taking a bunch of pictures outside. I was like, how long before we get asked to bugger off? Even though it's in the middle of Union Square, it's not an isolated area or anything like that. Huh. But just, and again, going back to Dark Tourist, as David Ferrier was going to some of these like really restrictive countries where they had to have escorts, and they were kind of told without being told that their rooms are bugged, that they have no privacy while they're in this country. That's freaky to me. It doesn't need to be supernatural. That's freaky to me.
Yeah. Well, the plaque, and really what the plaque itself isn't scary, but it's what it represents. It's scary.
Yes.
Is that goes back to what we we're talking about before about A, you have an imagination, and B, it's with using that imagination to speculate what might be going on. Yeah. And so your brain starts spinning things that could kind of, ooh, this is a little creepy. And basically they could just be like telling dirty jokes to each other. But but your mind, that represents something that's the unknown that I get it now.
So that's what scares you then, DJ, the unknown. Or maybe not.
I give you a very specific answer to this, and it's not very philosophical or deep, but it's kind of ironic given something we were talking about before. Ever since I was a little kid, I was afraid of, not afraid, maybe too strong, but I get a little antsy at night when I look at dark windows, like that scene in Midnight Mass. Yeah. Because you never know what's going to I always think if a face suddenly appears there, I'm going to puke. And as an adult too, I look at a dark window and think it would be really creepy if suddenly a face just floated by that. Right. So again, it's like the face does not float by, but it's the possibility that something could happen. That kind of stuff scares. So it's always I tend to project what might happen, rather than being scared by something actual that's there for you. If it's there in front of me, I can handle it. Right. What I think might happen, like what's behind the doors of the Bohemian Society, or what, that's kind of gets my wheels turning a little bit.
Totally. And I think you're nailing it with the imagination thing, because that's why I get scared. I'm imagining how much worse it can get. And, you know, like George C. Scott's movie in the 80s called The Changeling, not the Angelina Jolie one, but it's the typical haunted house movie, but there are no special effects. And he just moves into this giant old house after his wife and daughter got into a horrible car accident and died, and he was kind of trying to start over. And there's a haunting, he's trying to figure it out, and of course all these things happen, but all the spooky things are just as simple as doors opening, you know, pounding on walls. There's this seance where he turns up the volume and you can hear the kid talking, and like little things like that. The best moment is when this little bouncy ball keeps showing up around the house, and he gets so frustrated and decides to take the ball, drive it across town, throw it into the river, and then come back home. And when he's coming back home, it's just still the best moment. The ball comes bouncing down the stairs, and it's wet.
First, oh yes, but first you don't even hear it. You just hear the sound of the ball bouncing down the stairs.
Yes.
And again, talk about, you don't need to have blood and guts to be like, oh, I know what this is going to be. You know,
Yeah,
it's
right.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, you know, going back to the original film of The Haunting of Hill House, it was based on the Shirley Jackson novel, but then there was a movie made in the 60s, I guess, black and white, really scary movie. The one scene that kind of stands out, or I remember, last time I saw it was probably 1972, so I don't remember that much about it, but I do remember this one scene where there were two characters, I even forget who they were, two women, they were sisters, whatever, but they were in bed together and they were kind of held together, and they started hearing sounds, and I'm forgetting what the sounds were. I guess there were some sound effects that were involved, and
and doors opening.
They were scared, and then one girl says, and they're holding hands, and one girl says, "Stop squeezing my hand so hard."
Right.
The other girl says, "I'm not holding your hand."
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
That was, you didn't even see anything. It was just like, holy shit.
Totally. Yeah.
What the hell was that?
Yeah.
That was
or
cool.
Like planes, trains, and automobiles. Those aren't pillows.
Right. Terrifying. That reminds me of one. It wasn't The Ring, I don't think, but it was around that same time. It was with Naomi Watts was in whichever one I'm thinking of.
That's
Yeah,
the Ring.
that was great.
It was The Ring. Okay. Where we go again, it feels like a typical, very well executed ghost story movie where creepy stuff is happening, and then she's kind of deciding like, okay, this poor person experienced this, and this is how I can let their soul rest, kind of a thing. They're going on some mission to try to help out this ghost. And then it happens, and we feel like the movie's over, and she lays down with her son, and she's like, don't worry, so-and-so, I took care of this. And the kid bolts up in bed, says, "You helped her?"
Right.
Like, oh no, we did the wrong thing. The movie's just starting now, even though we're an hour in. That was a fantastic turn.
Yeah. 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 What do you say, Scott?
Sure. Yeah. Let's do you want to start her up?
I'll start with mine. It's not very long.
And it's on theme because it is Mike Flanagan related.
So I'm going to share my screen and I'll show you a little video, but my sister was watching what is it called? The Haunting of Bly Manor. I think that's what it's called. Yeah. And she was really getting into it. She doesn't like really scary movies, but she likes being spooked a little bit, but she was getting into the story because of the character relationships. And there was one particular episode late in the season where it does this whole flashback where you learn about one of the characters and how she gave birth to a baby. And there was this long scene where there was voiceover and the character was talking about basically how much she loved her new child. It was really this very meaningful monologue, and her sister in the show was watching over, and she was, coming into bed with her baby for the first time. And it was just very inspiring. And my sister really felt emotional about it. She was going through a couple of things in her life at the time that kind of got drawn out because of the scene. And so she decided to record the screen because she wanted to remember the scene. And she had subtitles on it so that she would be able to, look back and just remember the scene. So she records the scene and something walks in front of her phone. She's just using her iPhone, and I'll share my screen and I'll show you. I might have to skip ahead a little bit, but So hopefully you all can see this. I can't make it any bigger, but and if hopefully you can hear it too. Let me just zoom ahead here. Okay.
Nothing holds, all things change given time. Change does not often announce itself. It does not trumpet its arrival. Change is emergent. By the time I read.
So that was it. I'll do it again because my sister tested this. Like she tried putting her finger in front of the thing. She recorded it 2 or 3 more times and it never repeated.
All things change given time. Change does not often announce itself. It does not trumpet its arrival. Change is emergent. By the time I read.
It's so weird. Even when I watch it now, it's so weird. I don't know if you could hear the sound it was making. For everybody who's listening to only the audio, I apologize. You won't be able to see it. But it was so strange that we watched it over and over and over again and slowed it down. And there was all this sound that came out. And all she was doing was just sitting there holding the phone. She wasn't moving her hand around. It moves a little at the end because she was like, what is happening? Like she looked on the other side of her phone and nothing was there. So it didn't happen to me, obviously, but she was like running over and like, Max, you will not believe what just happened. And yeah.
Does she have cats?
She does. It was not a cat though, because she was up like this and the floor was like, way down there.
Yeah. Because that went to full black too. That wasn't.
Yeah.
I love that and here compressed audio. It sounded like a gasp right beforehand. That's how it sounded to us. But I also love that it comes right after the line "change does not often present or announce itself."
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
Now, obviously, it wasn't technical because it doesn't look electronic. Doesn't look.
No, and it slowly moves in over it, and she like showed me a couple of recordings of where maybe her finger was slowly kind of slipping over, and you can see the silhouette of a pink finger, and it's not the same thing. Plus the sound, like where the microphone's on the bottom of the phone, the video thing is on the top, and so she would have had to be like, I don't know, it's just very strange.
That it would be such amazing viral marketing if they had some AI part of it, so that if somebody tries to film our show, some ghostly experience would happen.
Augmented reality or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is wild. That is wild.
So there's my little fantastic story. It was a short one.
Sure.
And so she did it a couple of times, and it only happened that once.
Only happened that way that one time. She was not able to recreate it. Yeah. Weird.
It's pretty wild.
It's so funny. I totally concept wise, I believe in ghosts. I believe in all that kind of stuff. But whenever someone gives me a specific example, I'm trying to punch holes.
Same here. Yeah. Totally. Totally. But when I watched it the first time, though, I got such goosebumps, and it was because of the sound. It was like this slime was coming in like a static slime. It was just so strange, man. And it still gives me goosebumps watching it.
Static Slime will be my new punk rock band name.
Wow.
DJ, do you have one, or shall I go?
I've got one. Hopefully this will be fun. This isn't necessarily a spooky story, but it is a scary story. And it is 100% true. There's nothing supernatural about it. There's nothing uncanny, but it's flipping scary. For anyone who follows me or has read my stuff or seen my shows, they know that like many people, I am not alone. I have a fear of clowns. There is a name for it. I've coined the term bozophobia, but in fact, I use that in Are You Afraid of the Dark thing, classic bozophobe. But Max, you know this because you lived in the circus town there.
So I lived across the street from the Clown Hall of Fame, for crying out loud.
You're right. But I don't know if Scott, I've ever shared this with you or Mac, but I have the story as to where it began from someplace. It wasn't just some unfounded thing. I had a clown incident.
Reason. Okay.
There was a gutter and there was a drain. There was a boat that flowed into it. There's a balloon. It wasn't supernatural. It happened. Boy, I remember these images I'm going to portray. I remember as if they happened yesterday. And I was like 2 years old, 3 years old. Back in those days, there was something known as the Saturday matinee at the movies. And parents would take their kids, drop them off at the movie theater, and it was whatever kid movie was playing, and parents would go away for a while. And in this theater, it was really nothing but little kids. So it was Armageddon in there, you know, it was kids. And so my mother, I have two older sisters. One's 5 years older than me, one's 8 years older than me. So they're young tweens, whatever, and I'm a little toddler. This was the first time I was ever taken to a movie. I had never been to a movie before. So it was my mother, my two sisters, and myself. And we went into the theater for a Saturday matinee. The movie was The Shaggy Dog.
Sure.
So right off the bat, if you could picture, you go in, it's mayhem in this place. It's kids running around, jealous. So already I'm on edge to begin with. The scene is set for me being just a little bit. I've never been in an experience of that before. I'm probably holding next to my mother like this, like, oh my God. And then they had a cartoon first. I remember it was a Huey, Dewey, and Louie cartoon. And again, I'd never even seen a big screen before. So it's kind of like information overload.
Yeah, overstimulated.
So it's just a lot of stuff going on. In between the cartoon and the movie, the theater owner comes out, manager, whatever, and he says, "Kids, we have a special guest today."
Oh no.
And he says, "Right here is Clarabelle the Clown." Now, you guys are too young. There's a TV show called Howdy Doody.
Oh, sure.
Which was shot in New York, I assume. I lived in suburban New York. And it was Howdy Doody. The main guy was Bronco Bob or Buffalo Bob, I think his name was. He was the guy in like a cowboy suit. And Howdy Doody was a marionette, you know, who would look like looking like Woody from. I think Woody was probably based on Howdy Doody.
Scary in himself.
He's a marionette, and he's talking in like in a little theater or whatnot. But one of the other characters, human characters, was Clarabelle the Clown. And Clarabelle was a classic clown, the classic clown makeup, and Clarabelle did not speak. Clarabelle had like a box with horns, like Ooga horns.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's the way, you know, how you feeling today, Carol? You know, it was that kind of thing. It's, you know, hysterical stuff.
Right.
I don't know why kids thought that was fun. I don't know. But anyway, so this guy goes up and he goes, "Clarabelle the Clown." The place just explodes because these are all kids who are watching Howdy Doody because they're, and so this is like saying there's a big movie star coming down there. And I remember looking up the aisle and seeing this big fucking clown coming coming down the thing. And I was like, wow, my head exploded.
Oh no.
And I was like, wow. Apparently I was a puddle. My mother had to take me out of the theater.
Oh,
she wasn't going to take my sisters out. They went to see the movie. Plus they paid. My mother was sitting in this car. I remember it was hot. And she was just like, "Rrr." So that was the main part of the story of why I really do have a fear of clowns. Cut to 30 years later. I was living in Norwalk, Connecticut at the time, living in a condo. And I had this neighbor, a guy, his name was Marty. I remember his name was Marty. And he invited me over for dinner at his condo, you know, across the way when I went for dinner. And looking up at his mantle, he had a picture on his mantle. And it was like a group shot of him, his best friend, and Clarabelle the Clown. And I was like, wow. That's him. Why do you have Clarabelle the Clown? He goes, because Clarabelle is my friend's dad.
Oh my God.
Played Clarabelle. then I told him the story, and I was just like, this. He goes, "Oh man, it's a good thing you never went over his house, because there's nothing freakier than going over the house and seeing the Clarabelle costume hanging up in the closet."
Jesus.
So I'm like, now, I know where Clarabelle lives. I can exercise my demons and kill him, I guess. I don't know, but so again, that's not a supernatural story, but that is the origin of my absolute genuine fear of.
But now, so between the age of 3 and 30, did you know it was Clarabelle the clown you were afraid of, or did you block that out for many years?
I know. No, I know.
Okay.
And it just, I think, perpetuating the story of why I'm drawn to supernatural stuff and whatnot. My mother loved she's passed away, but she loved supernatural stories. She called them "ooh yeah" stories. Ooh yeah.
I love that.
Ooh yeah story. And there was one time, I forgot what year it was, but this tells you something about my mother. She calls me up one day and she says, I just read the new Stephen King book. She's a big Stephen King fan. Really? She goes, I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but you got to read it. Like, okay, Mom, I'll read the book. Yeah, it was it.
Oh, no.
Thanks, Mom.
Mom.
Jeez.
So does this translate directly? Because I know one of the most fan beloved episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark is a clown episode.
Oh, absolutely. My Zeebo the Clown was really a
Cathartic
kind of thing, though it kind of backfired on me a little bit. The guy, if you're familiar with the show Are You Afraid of the Dark, we had a recurring character called Dr. Vink. He was in several episodes. He was like a mad scientist type guy. And the guy who played Dr. Vink was also in the clown episode, and he played this carnival barker who might have been Zeebo the Clown, but we don't really know. So I mean, he was, but it was a little bit leading. Is it him? But it really is. And most in that episode, most you ever saw of Zeebo was either drawings of the clown, or there's a big dummy that was Zeebo the Clown. So that was an episode where it's all about what you think you might see, because the story is about how this kid is dared to go into this fun house that's called Zeebo's Fun House, and he steals Zeebo's nose. And he goes home that night, and essentially Zeebo comes to get the nose back. But you never actually see Zeebo. You see all hints of Zeebo. You see footprints. You see all this kind of stuff. And there's one moment in the episode where we actually see fleetingly, we see Zeebo the way he would be if he was a real person. It's when this kid's walking through this fun house, and he's going by those funky mirrors, the wiggly mirrors, and he goes on, and he goes by, and then Zeebo's in one of them. But it was this actor in full clown makeup to be Zeebo. And you only see it fleetingly, but it backfired on me one day because we were in the makeup trailer, and the makeup woman, and he actually said to him, DJ's afraid of clowns, to the actor, DJ's afraid of clowns. So he's like, oh, really? Okay, right. So I'm sitting there, and she's putting the makeup on this guy. She's putting full clown makeup on. It only takes 15 minutes. It's not complex makeup. Then you put the wig on, and he transformed from this guy Aaron into Zeebo the Clown, and he started coming to me. He's like, hi, DJ. Good. I mean, he tried to tickle me. And it was just, I went from 10 minutes before he was Aaron, and then I was in a cold sweat, and I couldn't leave, and it was totally planned. I couldn't believe it. So
he was just trying to think, how quickly can I get fired off of this job?
I know. Right. So that's my parable.
No, that's good, and I love that we then can circle it back around to then you used it in your writing too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's great.
Cathartic.
It paid for itself there.
It didn't. I don't know how cathartic it was. I'm still afraid of clowns, but
yeah, really didn't solve the problem. Well, Scott, what's
this? I have one more thing. A funny thing happened. Boy, this is telling of our times. I was at a screening. There's a theater near where I live called the Old Town Music Hall or something like that, where they show old movies. And all this month they're doing Universal horror movies. So my wife and I went to see Bride of Frankenstein, which is great to see projected. And they did, it's an old theater, and they had it all set up with Halloween decorations and whatnot. And at one point I turned a corner and there was a big clown dummy standing there. So I had a picture taken next to it. And I posted it on Instagram or whatever. And I said, oh, the bozophobe here is afraid of clowns. And somebody actually wrote something like, you can't really say that because you're going to offend someone. Afraid of clowns. I'm like, really? It's come to that we can't. We're so sensitive that we can't make fun of people who are afraid of clowns.
They've got their lobbyists too. And
right. Jesus.
But if anything, there was one line in a Pendragon book I wrote because I had a whole clown sequence in one of those stories because that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I said statements like there are two kinds of people in this world: people who fear and loathe clowns, and clowns.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And
that's enough of my clown stuff.
I love Kevin's line. He said, well, fright what you know.
Yeah.
There you go. It's great. So yeah, I will share one of the stories. I used to run, for those of you who don't know, I used to run the LA Hauntings tour company, where we would take people from downtown LA through Hollywood Boulevard and a little bit of West LA and give the haunted history of LA. And we're actually going to be getting that going again fairly soon, which is exciting. But I mean, writing that was a blast. I love ghost stories. I love history and folklore and urban legends, and just kind of seeing how a place could have a story associated with it. And then that kind of becomes the culture, because that's a story that everybody in that certain neighborhood grows up with. And by the way, we do go by the Hollywood Tower apartments as well, which has a little Tower of Terror connection in there to DJ's movie. Sadly, we can't go by the Ambassador where DJ shot that because it does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
But there might still be some spooky things going on depending on who you ask. Anyway, one of the places that, well, I guess one of the frustrations in trying to put one of these tours together is you'll often get told, oh, you should check out this place. It's haunted. Like, okay, what's the story? How is it? In what way is it haunted? Like, oh, it's just haunted. I don't know. It's haunted. Like, that's not a good story. So then you go and you do your research and you interview and do as much digging as you can possibly do. And now, Max, I know you've heard the story. DJ, I don't know if I ever told it to you, but unfortunately, this is not a personal experience, but it's still it's a great story about the Formosa Cafe, right down in the West Hollywood area. It's a old LA trolley car. That's how it started out. It was the sandwich shop right across the street from a back lot, and just a really great grab a sandwich and go back to work kind of a place. Started in 1936 by prize fighter Jimmy Bernstein. And, you know, it was successful. They built a building onto the side of it, but the original trolley car is still there. It's a cool place if you're in town. A great place to grab a drink. LA Confidential, some big scenes from that were shot there too. Anyway, so I was doing my test run. I just brought some friends out and was doing the tour, and I thought, like, this is a great place to actually just be able to stretch our legs, because it was a van tour, it was a driving tour. And I go in and I ask the manager who is there, like, hey, so I've heard that this place is haunted. What do you think about that? Is it haunted? Do you think it's haunted? And he said, you know, I've been manager here for 10 years. And up until last week, I would have said no. Like, that's a great way to start a story. So, okay, what happened last week? And well, end of the night, busy weekend night. Everybody had left, cleaning up the bar, getting it reset for the next day. My head bartender is the last employee to leave. I saw him out, and I went upstairs to the office. There's only one room on the second floor, and that's the manager's office. And he said, you know, as he sits down behind the desk, he hears that there's somebody walking around on the first floor. Just assume that, oh, I guess the bartender left something behind. I'll go see what's going on. He gets up and he starts to come down the staircase. And now you can hear that there's multiple people in the building. He's like, what? Oh gosh, maybe I forgot to lock the door, and a couple of people wandered in after bar time. And by the time he gets to the bottom of the staircase, he hears that he's got a full house. He's hearing the benches moving. He's hearing a crowd of people. Like, oh, how am I going to control this? I'm one person and there's nobody else here. I'm getting overrun. He turns the corner into the main room. Dead silence, totally dark. You can hear a pin drop. he's having his mind and reality shaken. So he checks the door is locked. He goes around, checks the windows. Obviously not like people are jumping out of windows or anything, but he still checks everything. Everything is locked up tight. Goes up to his office where he always keeps his personal cell phone and his work cell phone right next to each other. He would usually use his work phone to call the bartender, which he wants to do to try to talk to somebody, and it's disappeared. He has no idea where it is, which is something that happens in paranormal phenomena. It's called an apport, where usually it's a necessity item or a sentimental item will go missing and reappear in a very weird place, sometimes weeks later. So he uses his personal cell phone, calls his bartender, probably freaks him out because he's still very panicky, but just trying to say like, hey, you didn't just come in here with like 40 friends and leave real quick, did you? Bartender's like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah, just have another one, buddy. So hangs up, whatever the hell, he packs it up for the night. He goes home. Very next day, comes in, another big busy day at the Formosa Cafe, goes through the same process at the end, cleaning up the place, says goodbye to his lead bartender, except this time he does not want to go back up to his office. That's where the problem started to begin with last time. So he takes a seat in one of the booths in the main building on the first floor, right by the bar. And of course, this is after bar time, so he can have a cigarette now. And he's sitting there, and the ashtray is across the table from him. And he's using his cell phone. He's texting someone, cigarette in one hand, cell phone in the other. And at the corner of his eye, he can see that the ashtray is beginning to slide across the table towards him. He picks his head up off his phone. The ashtray stops. He goes back to texting, but obviously keeping the corner of his eye on this. The ashtray again begins to move, and he does not break focus on the phone. He's playing chicken at this point. The ashtray slides all the way across the table until it's up to the edge on the brink of falling off the table into his lap, and it just stops and stays right there. Now, unbelievable. I've got the goosebumps a little bit just telling the story, but to me, it's spectacular. First off, those are from a writing standpoint, those are two pretty emotional and big moments that don't need special effects. They're not, one's not visual at all, it's just audio. But the thing that I always take to heart is that this guy has been a manager at this place for 10 years, no paranormal experiences whatsoever. And then he has two huge ones just days before this guy walks in the door about to start up a tour company and say, hey, do you have any ghost stories? And this guy is able to tell me those stories. And now those stories have been retold and retold and retold and retold for the hundreds of times I've given my tour and do things like this. So if there was some spirit or entity or whatever there that wanted its presence known, it knew exactly the right way and time to do it. So there's my story.
That's obviously that's really kind of cool. It's interesting. And it makes you wonder why at that moment? Why did it take 10 years what was it about that moment that whatever the entity was decided to?
So the ghost knew Scott was coming. Scott's going to be here in about a week. I've got to do something spooky.
It could be like, it's hard to do this, but I know if we time it out for this, we only have to do two things ever. And that story's going to keep getting told.
They'll be talking about this forever.
Yeah, exactly.
I wrote a trilogy of books where the first book is a ghost story and a lot of stuff happens. The second book is very much of it is the same story told from the ghost's point of view and why the things that happen. So you get to revisit scenes that you read in the first book from why the ghost did what they did.
Yeah,
so
right.
So I imagine that ghost doing exactly that, saying, this guy's coming in, he's going to give a tour, we need business. Right. How are we going to let's do some stuff.
What should I do? And he just looks at the ashtray, just moving over.
It's just that easy. They love this stuff.
Yeah, right.
That's cool. Oh, that's great. Wow. Well, happy Halloween, everybody. Thank you. Yeah. Thank everybody for watching, and everybody that's going to be watching on the replay. Actually, anybody watching on the replay, comment, leave your own ghost stories. We'd love to read that. That'd be a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
But DJ MacHale books, I put the link in the the chat area.
Oh, good.
That is the place to go check out DJ's work and what he's up to. Thank you, DJ, our very first Hall of Famer of the Fantastic Story Society. Thank you for joining us.
Do I get a yellow jacket or something?
A green one.
We'll figure
An
something
ashtray.
out.
You'll get it in about a week.
We'll figure it out. But yeah, thanks so much for joining. Anything else that you wanted to plug, promote, social media, any of that kind of stuff that you want to?
No, does anybody could check me out, djmachalebooks.com. I answer all my email. You hit the thing that says email DJ and it comes right to me and I answer everything. Instagram. I fall short of TikTok. I do not do TikTok.
No.
I don't. That's a bridge too far for me. Instagram used to be a bridge too far. Now TikTok is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, and all my
we-
handles are DJ MacHale, highly secretive.
We
There we
do
go.
want to. Oh, he's saying goodbye. We do want to plug the Fantastic Story Society. So if you are on Spotify or iTunes, you can find the podcast there. We're going to have a couple new episodes coming out pretty soon and follow along.
Yeah, we just DJ, you might find this interesting. We just did the last episode we did that came out. We interviewed a tour guide on location at a haunted restaurant in Madison, Wisconsin. And this haunted restaurant started out as a funeral home. So that's part of the backstory. And then part of the, this is going to get way darker, even compared to a funeral home, darker fast, because one of the Heaven's Gate cultists committed suicide on that day that everybody in San Diego died, took his own life also at that establishment. And so we did a paranormal investigation after the interview, and some highlights of the investigation are in the episode too. It was weird and wild and also cool. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Every city is full of stories like that. And
Absolutely.
LA
Every
is
one of them. Yeah,
more
from
than
small town to big town, for sure. That's why we did the Fantastic Story Society, but also why Scott has whatsyourghoststory.com. He wants to hear what other people have to say about, their own stories. And well, we love Halloween and we love having DJ on. So thanks, man. I appreciate the time.
It was great. Thanks, everybody. It was fun.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Halloween.